are live. Welcome to DC to B Revolution, helping chiropractic students think big in order to live large. I'm your host, Noah Volz, and today I'm here with Dr. Jeff Spencer. Dr. Jeff was one of the leading sports chiropractors in the world, and he's been a cornerman for Olympic gold medal winners, Tour de France champions, and many others. He created the Champions Blueprint based on his own experience, and now he uses that to help top performers reach the pinnacle of their success. So, Dr. Jeff Spencer, thanks so much for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Noah.
Yeah. So, being a chiropractic student, knowing that you had a lot of successes kind of leading up to chiropractic school, I was hoping that you could kind of walk us through the process that you took in order to decide that chiropractic school was the right choice for you, and then how you were able to leverage that into becoming one of the leading sports chiropractors in the world.
Well, I was in the consulting world in high performance, and I was asked a lot of questions about injury prevention and management, and also how do you get well and stay well. And I'd been out of graduate school for 10 years, so I decided to explore the world of health and primary health, being a primary healthcare provider, and I selected chiropractic because that uses hands and natural methods, and it's a little bit more open to trying some more esoteric things to create models that can lead to long-term physical change for the people to become more active participants in life. And when I got involved in school, I basically followed the path of my inquiry, and I gravitated towards certain things, and other things there wasn't that gravity, and I followed my gravity, and eventually I got into the sports performance world, which is natural for me, being an Olympian and being around that environment made a lot of sense, and being someone that has a very exploratory, curious mind that really is always interested in seeing how far I could take something. I look for ways of creating the best possible model for being proactive in terms of injury prevention and peak performance, and also minimizing the time it takes to recover from injuries. And I put together a very unique and eclectic system based on natural health principles that proved extraordinarily effective, and was 2004 International Sports Chiropractor as a result of that work.
Beautiful. I wanted to hone in on a couple of things that you said that were really interesting to me, because on one hand, you said you kind of followed your curiosity and the gravity of that. But also, in following your curiosity, I feel like you really drilled down and learned how to prune out the stuff that wasn't really part of your path. Can you talk about, how, when I think of curiosity, I think of like trying every little thing that's out there. Can you talk a little bit about your process and how that curiosity actually helped you dive deeper?
Well, because I was an Olympian, there are certain things I knew to be true about peak performance and recovery, injury prevention and injury care that defied some classic conventional explanations. So I knew that there was something out there different. I wasn't quite sure what that was, but because I had a lot of experience and I have a very good sense of my body, and because I have a master's degree in sports science, I had a really good foundation to evaluate premises that were being thrown about as far as methods that do work and whether or not they made sense to me. And I eventually created a model that incorporated a variety of different things that worked as a system. And that's basically the way that I did it. I think everybody, maybe people do want to try everything, but I think that it's better to really follow your curiosity and what interests you. I naturally got interested in reflex techniques like DNFT and BEST and activator, along with the conventional forms of adjusting. And to me, adjusting is only one tool. It's not everything. And so I explored those things. And again, I looked for things that were of extraordinary innovation, and I looked for things that could be combined together to work together, knowing that not one thing does everything, to create a model and a system that in its totality allows people to get well and stay well consistently and predictably. So that was really how I did it.
Beautiful. I'm so glad that you created this system. I wanted to kind of fast forward a little bit to, what you're doing now, where it appears that you've kind of transitioned out of, providing care for Olympic level athletes to coaching other chiropractors to do, to provide that kind of care, coaching them to get to the level in their career where they can do that. Can you talk a little bit about how you support chiropractors where they're at and help them to kind of see the long-term vision of what they can create?
Well, first off, my practice, I am no longer in practice, but I do study health and creating very innovative, revolutionary healthcare models consistently every day. I spend time at that. And I have a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge in that area. So that's very important to me. But most of what I do right now is that I work with high-level performers. People have this idea that I only work with athletes because I was an Olympian, but that's not true. Most of my time is spent in the business world and in the high-performance world of people, not just any specific discipline, because health is health and the body's the body. And whatever we do in terms of our profession, that's a separate technical issue. So I don't look at anybody as having a distinctly unique body, because there are principles, and again, the body's the body. And so, with that, I have continued to work in the world of high performance, helping people become higher performers as individuals themselves that really understand how to achieve big goals consistently and predictably, which to me, goal achievement is really the primal skill of life, because if we can't achieve our goals, then dreams can't manifest. So that's a really important thing for me, and I've cracked the code on that. And as far as helping the chiropractic world, I mean, if there are people that ask me to come in and speak at conventions or come to schools, I come and I share with them what my 55 years in the high performance world has taught me about health and fitness, and how chiropractic, in the definition that I see it as being, fits into that picture, which is essential. But it does have to be defined, because there's many different ways of defining what chiropractic really is. So that's what I do. I don't teach any chiropractic seminars at this point, but I do again, presentations to state conventions when asked to do that. And I did work with laser technology for easily maybe 15 years. I did seminars for Konya Healthcare during that period of time.
Yeah, perfect. I have heard of your name through Erconia. Erconia is very big at our school. And, people who are in my shoes, students, we come to chiropractic school because we have a very clear goal in mind, just as you did when you went to chiropractic school, of, offering health and wellness to the masses. And, whatever, everybody's scale is slightly different in terms of what they want to provide. Can you talk, about the preparation that it takes to determine that chiropractic is the right path for somebody, and in order for them to really excel in school and out of school?
Well, deciding whether chiropractic is right for you, I think, is experiential, because unless you're involved in the curriculum, you really don't know what it's really going to take to get through it. But what I do know is that once you're in, everybody gets through. You just got to stay in the game, and once you're out, then the real learning begins, and you can start to craft and create the healthcare model of your vision. And as you become more skilled and exposed to different things, and you can modify that accordingly. And to me, that's extraordinarily important. There's what I would suggest that people do is that you do the best you can in school, but then you spend time in people's offices really understanding the reality of what practice really is. Part of it's being a clinician, another part's managing people, another part's being a business person. I mean, all of those are essential ingredients in becoming a successful practitioner that has a vital and thriving practice. Not one of those is significant enough to create a great practice. All three of those have to be sufficiently developed to have a practice of merit that can stand on its own in the workplace of today is extraordinarily competitive.
Yeah, and in terms of developing those skills, I know that that's something that you can help people to do. Is there any preparation that you require of, chiropractors or chiropractic students before they reach out to you to work with you one-on-one or to, attend one of your workshops?
Well, I think first off, the sooner better that you explore things, the more exposure a person really has. I think what's really important to me for anybody in the health sciences is that we really understand the body as it really is. And quite honestly, in our curriculums, we're all getting exposed to partial information about heals, the way that it responds to care, different methods of being able to interface with the body to accelerate healing and wellness. There's only so much time in school, and a lot of what we learn gets routed through different filters. And so we get a partial exposure, and I just feel like there's a whole other universe out there that can enlighten us to make some of the miracles that we see in healthcare are normal rather than the occasional occurrence. And that would be my best advice, is to get some very smart people that really understand the body as it really is. There's many things that I think need to be made aware of that are extraordinarily strong considerations for foundational knowledge about the body and how the body gets and stays well. And I just suggest that people really avail themselves of an understanding of the body that's just beyond collecting a bunch of techniques. Techniques are okay, but I think you should have the fewest techniques possible, and you should have techniques that cover every one of the criteria. And we should look at the idea of interference through the eyes of what the body really is. I mean, a nutritional deficiency is equally important in interference as is subluxation. Loss of fitness is another interference. Poor posture is an interference. Inappropriate movement patterns are interferences. There's lots of things out there that I think are really important. There's also multiple communication systems in the body. There's more than just the nervous system. The nervous system, I'm glad I have one, and it certainly is important, but there are other systems out there that work cooperatively with the nervous system to control and coordinate all the structures and functions of the body. And science is really clear about that. In fact, what controls healing is the connective tissue itself. And Robert Becker discovered that in his work, and that he has very well described in his book, The Body Electric. It's in the connective tissue itself. So again, I feel like we really need to understand the mechanisms of the body in terms of its cytology, in terms of its biology and physiology and anatomy, that give us another glimpse into how do we make the healing miracle our normal rather than the occasional exception. And so that would be my suggestion. There are some extraordinarily brilliant people out there that have written some amazing books that give us a glimpse into that mystery, that allow us to be able to create a model. That's what I did. I met someone that wrote 2 amazing, groundbreaking books, but he was not a clinician. This was in 2003. And I recognized that what he had discovered and shared was the key to the practice of the future clinically. But yet he couldn't create it because he wasn't a clinician. But yet I saw what he had brought to the conversation, and I really realized that there was a whole other way of creating a practice model that could create clinical outcomes in a significantly shorter time with a much higher level of predictability than was the normal at that time. And from what I can tell right now, that premise still holds true. There's a lot of things that can be done to dramatically accelerate the effectiveness of what our care really is. So.
Yeah, thank you. I know that, as a student, I'm sure every chiropractor who watches this wants to accelerate those outcomes, wants to find ways to really help the body. And I love how you talked about this holistic system, and that, it's not just the nervous system, that it's the whole body, and really starting at the very foundational level. Like you mentioned, like, is the cell functioning well? And if that one cell is functioning well, is that cell functioning well in relationship to all the other cells? I can see a lot of students, feeling like since they only have partial information, they'd love to know what these virtual mentors in terms of books are, or, what would be the authors to start looking for, the seeds of wisdom to start exploring. Could you share a few of those?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think certainly at Life, you guys have got a living treasure in Dan Murphy. I mean, he's somebody I know very well, and Dan is literally a living treasure. And people can learn a lot from Dan with his particular interest and depth of knowledge about neurology and some other things like that. There isn't an academician that has more credibility than Dan in my book. He's as high as they go. I think there are some other really important books, but they're pretty heady and they're pretty in depth, and they require more than a basic knowledge of anatomy. There's Cells, Gels, and the Engines of Life by Gerald Pollack, where he describes the cell as it really is. And the cell is very different than we're taught it to be. The cell is really not a water-filled bag. It's extremely different than that as we're taught it. And if we look at it as a water-filled bag, then we, at a fundamental level, don't really understand the basic organization of the body from its foundational building block, the cell, on up. And he gives an amazing insight into that, because he's a meticulous researcher. And if you want annotations and you want footnotes, then this is the place to go. And there's clearly another way of looking at this. Another book that I would suggest is called Energy Medicine: The Scientific Basis by Dr. James Oshman. And he's the guy that changed my view of how I could revolutionize practice. And I owe pretty much everything to him in a certain sense. That got me on this other way of looking at things. And he articulates the body in his works in a way that I've never seen anybody else do. But again, if you want to get annotations and footnotes and you want to look at the real deal, then that's a book that should be taken seriously. Same thing with The Body Electric with Robert Becker, one of the great minds in dealing with neuromusculoskeletal anatomy and healing and understanding. His book, The Body Electric, it's groundbreaking. Just say that you're not going to get chiropractic techniques from that, which I didn't, but I got an understanding of what the body was. And when I understood the body as it was, then I was able to create a chiropractic model around that used all sorts of devices, that used all sorts of manual techniques, all sorts of therapeutic interventions, of which there are many. And I created a model that addressed the fundamental physiology and anatomy that's required to get the body well and basically keep it well. And so those are three really good books, but they're heady. Just to warn everybody, they're very high density, and they will challenge some of the assumptions that we have about what the body is, but they challenge the assumption through the eyes of science and through what study and scientific scrutiny and investigation have revealed to us, that gives us glimpses and insights into how we can refine our model of care to again make the extraordinary the normal rather than the occasional exception.
Yeah, thank you for those recommendations. Really appreciate that. And yeah, I go back to what you said earlier about when you were in school, that insatiable curiosity that you had. And so, you mentioned how heady those books are, but obviously when you were in school, you had the willingness to really dig in deep to those and really understand where they were coming from. And that seemed to really serve you as you went forward, because then it gave you that foundation to really create those extraordinary outcomes. Was that ability to really kind of dig into that, something that you cultivated as an Olympian? And do you have kind of a framework that you use in order to assist your curiosity?
Well, as an Olympian, you're pretty persistent in terms of finding ways of getting the competitive advantage. And I didn't certainly pursue anything with the idea of getting the competitive advantage, either in practice or in competition. I purely did it with the idea of seeing how far I could evolve something so it could be as effective as possible. And that just is innately part of me. I've always had a self-starting engine. I never need to be motivated. I've got a self-starter. So with that gene, that works pretty well for me. And the other thing is that I have really good common sense, and I could have a pretty good BS-ometer. So I can really pretty much tell, because of my experience, when something is probably credible and when something is maybe not credible. And so with that, my quest has always been to really understand the mechanisms behind biology. And if we understand the mechanisms, then we can create clinical tools out of that. But if we just collect a bunch of tools and apply a bunch of tools without knowledge of the body, then we're guessing in practice. And I don't like guessing. I like certainty, and I like predicted outcomes. And I also like being out on the edge and investigating things that haven't quite made it onto the radar yet. That's just my personality, and something that I've always followed pretty aggressively. And the results have been, as I had hoped, pretty extraordinary. Not because I'm clever, but because I can ferret things out and put things together in combinations that, in combination, it can serve the body in a different way. And the one thing that I will say is there's not one technique that does everything out there. And if we think that it does, then we're trying to make the patient fit what we know, rather than looking at the reality of what the body actually needs to be able to remove the irregularities or the asymmetries that prevent the body from performing at its best.
Yeah. So thank you for, just kind of talking about how the body has this, in the chiropractic language, has this innate potential. And, what you're talking about is providing the circumstances or allowing that to come out, which is very much in alignment with the chiropractic philosophy. And, you really develop those tools and now are sharing those tools with other people who want to be pioneers like you were, and want to have those extraordinary outcomes and have them in such a way that they become normal. Like you said, that extraordinary is what becomes expected instead of ordinary outcomes.
Well, thanks for saying that. It's like, I really appreciate that. And, again, it's about the system. Not one thing does everything, but if we really understand the body and what the primary causes of dysfunction in the body are, and we have the ability to get in there and neuter those, so all the parts of the body work together as an integrated whole, then that's what really creates the health. It's not the one thing, it's the combination of all the things that we're doing that remove all of the interferences that enable the body to do what it does best. And you can't think your way to a place that you're not taking the body to. You're just not going to get there. And unless we identify the things as they truly are, and we have the mechanisms to interface with them, then we have a proportionate level of success in our clinical care. So to me, it always kind of starts with the body. And the bigger question to me is that, do our philosophies reflect the reality of what the body is? Because if our philosophies do not reflect what the body is, then we're not going to get the clinical outcomes that we expect, because there is a certain reality about the body. And in my opinion, in my experience, the body really calls the shots. And if we can work with the body as the body really is, then we have a great chance of, again, creating a vital practice that we are enthusiastic about showing up for each and every day, because we're confident in the clinical outcomes. And that would be my suggestion, is that I think it's important to listen to the merits of things being offered, and asking if they make sense, and looking at the biology and seeing if the biology looks like it can produce the results that are promised, and really understand that. And that's what I did. I was interested really like in mechanisms of how things worked, because if I understood the body as it is, then I can interface with it, and I can create a practice model with the techniques and modalities that will allow me to access the body as it really is.
Yeah, thank you. So I can imagine that, many students want to also, develop this practice model and also start to refine their understanding of biology in a way so they can really understand the fullness of what the body encompasses and not be limited by certain philosophies that tell, that only have a partial picture. So where can those students, learn more about you? How can they reach out? What's the best way for them to kind of continue this journey if their curiosity was piqued by what was said today?
Well, thank you very much, Noah. The best place to go is to my website. It's www.drjeffspencer.com. That's drjeffspencer.com. And it's a website. It's a personal site about me and where I've been and what I'm doing. It's not a chiropractic site that's got a bunch of techniques, but I really believe that what it does, it really begins with us and our ability to look at the path towards the bigger future. And quite honestly, I think the site that I put together, from what people have told me, just check it out. I mean, just the graphics on it, I think are pretty amazing from what people tell me. And so the other thing that I would suggest is that when you go there, just opt in, because I've got a great paper there for people. It's called How Not to Blow It Just Before You Win. And that's a great paper. I would suggest that people just enter your email address and you'll gain access to that paper that I have provided for people. And there's always room at the top for the best. Hang around people that are a couple of steps in front of you. Be tenacious in your inquiry about things. Make sure that you're willing to kind of step into the unknown a little bit and kind of investigate what's out there. And the 3 books that I just cited there, and Dan Murphy as The Living Treasure, I think are some of the best recommendations I could give people.
Yeah, thank you so much for all of that. Really appreciate you coming on the show. Really appreciate your approach to chiropractic and the unique, lens that you look through. I think that's so important for students to hear, especially as, in these formative years, so to speak, while we're in school.
Well, thank you. And I'll maybe finish with one statement here, is that I think it's really important not to try to make the patient fit what you know, but I think it's really important to be able to look at the patient and the patient's body as it really is, in its most transparent and comprehensive way, and have the clinical skills to be able to remove all of the interferences in the body to tie the body back together as a single integrated unit that's able to produce, hear these words, if you can produce energy efficient strain-free motion for the patient, then you have done them a lifetime service of good that will allow them to be an active participant in life that lives a vital and rich life.
Amen to that. I mean, you're unlocking all of their wildest dreams by that simple, or maybe not so simple, but it is relatively simple, creating that energy efficiency within their system, pain-free movement. So thank you once again.
You're so welcome. Thanks, Noah.
Yeah. So this has been a production of DC2B Revolution, helping chiropractic students think big to live large. If you enjoyed this interview, please subscribe to the channel and leave some comments in the comment section below. We'll see you next time.